The bullet hit the steel plate before anyone heard the shot. That is the thing about distance. Sound takes its time. The round travels faster than the news of itself, and by the time the crack reaches your ears, the damage is already done. Eva She had always loved that about long-range shooting, the silence before the confirmation, the moment between the trigger and the truth. She was standing at the edge of a military shooting range in the high desert of Nevada, and every man on that range had already decided she should not be there. There were 6 of them, Navy SEALs running a standard precision drill, moving between positions with the kind of casual efficiency that comes from doing a thing so many times it stops feeling like work. They wore no patches, no identifying markings. Their rifles cost more than most cars. Their spotter data was written in shorthand on laminated cards they had each made themselves, because a man who trusts his own numbers trusts nothing else. The oldest among them, Chief Petty Officer Marcus Hale, noticed Eva's car first, a gray pickup truck with a cracked rear bumper and a New Mexico plate. He watched it pull into the gravel lot without slowing down. He watched a woman step out carrying a rifle case and a spotting scope bag, walking toward the range like she had been there 100 times because she had been there twice before, and both times the men on the range had found urgent reasons to be busy. Hale was 44 years old. He had served in places where the geography had no name on any public map. He had the kind of face that gave nothing away, the kind built by years of watching things carefully and reacting to very few of them. He handed his spotter scope to the man beside him, a younger SEAL named Owen Briggs, and walked toward the woman. Eva was 39. She had brown hair she kept short, not for fashion but because shorter hair dried faster and caught less wind. She wore tan pants and a gray long-sleeve shirt and boots that had not been new in several years. Her rifle case was hard-sided and black. The scope bag was olive green and had a repair patch on one corner where the zipper had blown out, and she had fixed it herself with a kit she kept in her truck. She did not look like someone who was trying to impress anyone. That was, Hale would later think, the first thing he noticed about her. He stopped in front of her and said, "Can I help you?" His tone did not rise at the end the way a real question does. It sat flat, closed. Eva looked at him. She said her name. She said she was training for the National Law Enforcement and Military Precision Rifle Challenge, which ran in 14 weeks, and that she needed range time at long distances. She said she had reserved lane 7 through the base contact. She pulled a folded paper from her shirt pocket and held it out. Hale did not take it. He said, "That competition runs 800 to 1,300 meters. She said, "I know." He said, "What's your background?" She said, "Army, medic, 3 deployments, been shooting competitively for 6 years. What? He looked at her rifle case. He was not looking at it the way a person looks at an object. He was reading it. The case was a Pelican 1750, which was serious. The foam inside had been custom cut, which meant she had not bought it as a set. She had built the configuration herself. That meant she knew what she was carrying and exactly how much room it needed. He said, "What are you running?" She set the case on the hood of her truck, unlatched it, and opened the lid. Inside, resting in gray foam, was a .338 Lapua Magnum bolt-action rifle with a Nightforce AT-ACR scope mounted low and level, and a suppressor she had removed and stored in the second cutout beside it. Hale looked at it for 3 seconds. He said, "Try my rifle." He said it the way a man says something he expects to end an argument, because his rifle was a Barrett MR80 chambered in .300 Norma Magnum, which he had spent 2 years adjusting and tuning, and which he had fired somewhere north of 14,000 rounds through, and which was not a weapon a person picks up and shoots well without significant time on similar platforms. It was an offer that was also a wall. Eva closed her case. She looked at him. She said, "Okay." He had not expected her to say okay. He walked her to position 4, which was set at 800 meters. His MRAD was on the bipod with his data book open beside it. The wind was running about 6 miles per hour left to right, which Hale's flag system confirmed. The target was a 10-inch steel plate at the base of the berm. He told her the basic specs of the rifle. He told her the trigger weight. He did not give her his dope card because she had not asked for it. She got behind the rifle. She took about 40 seconds adjusting her position, which was not long. She looked through the scope. She reached up and made 2 adjustments to the turrets without asking anyone anything. She had done her own math in the 20 seconds before she got down. Then she was still. A person who has never watched a skilled shooter prepare to fire does not understand the quality of that stillness. It is not relaxation. It is a kind of controlled compression, like a held breath that has decided to become architecture. Everything stops, the body becomes a platform. The shot broke clean. The steel plate rang. She cycled the bolt and fired again, rang it again, she fired a third time, same sound, same delay. Then she stood up, stepped back from the rifle, and looked at Hale. He had the spotter scope up. He was looking at the target. He lowered the scope. He looked at the target without the scope, which was something a man does when he is trying to confirm what his eyes just told him. 3 rounds, 1 ragged hole you could cover with a silver dollar. Behind him, Owen Briggs had stopped writing in his data book. The other 4 men on the range had gone quiet in a way that was not something they chose. It just happened, the way sound leaves a room when the thing that filled it is suddenly impossible to ignore. Hale stood there for a moment. He said, "Okay." That was all. He walked her to lane 7. He showed her where the range bag supplies were kept, where to log her round count, and where the wind flags for the farther lanes were positioned. He did all of this in the same flat tone he used for everything. Then he went back to his team. Owen Briggs said, "Who is she?" Hale picked up his rifle and said, "Someone who knows how to shoot." Briggs looked at him. He said, "That's it." Hale said, "What else would it be?" He got behind his rifle and started his next string. But he was aware of lane 7 in the way you are aware of something that sits just outside what you expected the day to contain. He was not watching her. He was doing his job. But every time the .338 sent its particular sound across the range, lower and longer than the other rifles, something in the back of his mind registered it the way a man registers a sound he has not categorized yet. 2 hours later, when Eva began packing up, Hale was running wind calls for Owen on a 1,500-meter string. He did not walk over. He did not say anything. She drove out the same way she came in. Gravel, cracked bumper, New Mexico plate going small in the afternoon light. Owen said, "She's coming back, isn't she?" Hale said, "Wind's pushing left, adjust .2." Owen adjusted, he fired, the plate rang. Neither of them said anything else. But Hale had seen the target at 800 meters after she left, when he walked past lane 7 to check the flag tension on the far line anchor. He had looked at the paper overlay she had taped below the steel plate to track her first group before moving back. 7 rounds into a 2-inch cluster. That was not range time, that was not luck. That was a person who had spent a very long time building a very specific skill and who was now doing the quiet, unglamorous work of pushing it further. He did not know yet what that work had cost her. He did not know what she had left behind to be standing on a desert shooting range in borrowed lane time with a rifle she had built on a budget that told its own story. He did not know about her hand. He knew one thing: she could shoot. In his world, that was not nothing. It was, in fact, close to everything. She was back on Thursday. She was back the following Monday. She was back every time the range was open to credentialed civilians, which was 3 days a week. And on the days it was not open, she was somewhere else doing dry fire training in a garage in Albuquerque that smelled like solvent and old carpet, lying on a mat on the concrete floor, cycling a bolt on an empty chamber, building the 100th of a second that separates a shooter from a champion. The men on the range began to arrange themselves differently when she was there, not around her exactly, not with her either. Somewhere between those two things, in the way people move when they have not finished deciding what something means. On her 4th visit, Owen Briggs asked her what her dope looked like at 1,000 meters. She told him. He was quiet for a moment. He showed her his. They were close, not identical. She asked him 2 questions about his barrel twist, and he answered them. He asked her 1 question about her suppressor setup, and she answered that. That was the beginning of something that none of them put a name on. On her 6th visit, Hale spotted for her at 900 meters. He did not ask if she wanted a spotter. He simply walked over with his scope and set up beside her and started reading flags. She did not thank him. She got behind her rifle and started her string. He called wind, she shot. The rounds landed where math said they would. After the session, when she was logging her round count, he stood a few feet away and said, "You're running a 5-degree cant on your scope rail." She said, "I know, I compensate for it in my dope." He said, "It would be faster to fix it." She said, "I know that too. I don't have the mount hardware right now." He said nothing for a moment. Then he said, "I have hardware." She looked at him. She said, "Why?" He said because a 5-degree cant at 1,300 meters is a 17-inch error before you start adding wind. She said, I know the math. He said, I know you know the math. I'm offering you the hardware. She looked at him for another second. Something moved across her face and then was gone, the way weather passes over open country. She said, okay. He brought them out hardware the following Thursday. He did not make it a moment. He set it on the table beside her case and went to his own lane. She mounted it herself. She re-zeroed. It took her 11 minutes. When she shot her first group after the remount, it was tighter than the group before it. Hale, calling wind for Owen 40 meters to his left, registered the sound of it, the particular crack and ring of a clean, true shot finding the thing it was built to find. He did not say anything. But something in him, the part that had spent 20 years measuring people by the only standard that mattered when the margin was thin enough to cut you, had already arrived at a conclusion he hadn't yet put into words. She was the real thing. The only question now was whether she knew what the competition was actually going to ask of her. He suspected she did. He was not entirely sure she was ready for the answer. On a Tuesday morning 3 weeks before the competition, Eva arrived at the range earlier than usual. The desert was still cold, the kind of cold that sits flat on the ground and hasn't decided to burn off yet. She drove in before the gate officer changed shifts, signed in on the clipboard with the same 2-line signature she always used, and walked to lane 7 without stopping. She set up in the dark. She had done it enough times that she didn't need light for the routine parts. Case open, rifle out, scope caps off, bipod legs locked, bag positioned under the rear, cheek weld checked. She was behind the rifle before the sun cleared the ridge. Hale's truck was already in the lot. She had seen it on the way in and registered it without changing her pace. He was at lane 3, and she could hear the quiet routine of his setup, the particular sounds of a man who has done this long enough that each movement has an efficient sound and nothing more. When there was enough light, she started shooting. By the time the rest of the team arrived, she had run 2 complete strings at 800 meters and 1 at 1,000. She was moving to 1,100 when Owen Briggs walked past her lane and slowed down and looked at her target through his naked eye. He kept walking, but he looked. At 1,100 meters, the hold time mattered more. The hold was the span of time a shooter kept the crosshairs settled on the target while managing breath, heartbeat, and trigger pressure in a sequence so practiced it no longer felt like a sequence. For most shooters, the optimal window was between 4 and 5 seconds, long enough to stabilize, short enough that the heartbeat didn't pulse the crosshair off target. For Eva, 1,100 meters was where the hold became complicated. Not in a way anyone could see, that was the thing about it. From the outside, she looked like every other skilled shooter on that line, still, measured, deliberate. The rifle moved with her breathing and then stopped as she came to the bottom of her exhale and the shot broke. But her left hand, which wrapped the front of the stock just forward of the magazine, had a tremor in it that lived in the lateral muscle below her thumb. It was small, it was consistent, and at 1,100 meters, consistent small things became large problems. It had been there for 2 years, a souvenir from the last day of her last deployment, when a vehicle she was riding in went off a road it had no business being on, and she spent 4 days in a German hospital before anyone told her she was going home and not going back. She had learned to manage it, not to hide it. Hiding a tremor and managing one are 2 different skills, and only one of them produces results. She had spent months in that garage in Albuquerque, working on a modification to her cheek weld that shifted the pressure distribution in her hold, reducing the load on the lateral muscle enough that the tremor dropped below the threshold of accuracy impact. It worked at 900 meters. At 1,000 meters, it worked most of the time. At 1,100 meters, it was a negotiation, and negotiations sometimes go wrong. On her 3rd string of the morning, the negotiation went wrong. She was 3 rounds into a 5-round string when the tremor spiked, not dramatically. There was no visible movement, no shake anyone watching could have pointed to. But she felt it in the stock, felt the crosshair walk a fraction to the right, and she held the trigger through it instead of resetting, which was the wrong choice, made in the half-second window where choices happen faster than thought. The round hit 3 inches right of center. She cycled the bolt, finished the string. The last 2 rounds landed clean. She sat up, she looked at the target through her scope, logged the miss in her book. The column for missed shots had 11 entries in it. 7 of them were at 1100 meters or beyond. She stared at the number. She did not stare at it with despair. She stared at it the way an engineer stares at a load calculation that doesn't balance, looking for the variable she hadn't yet accounted for. Hale had moved to the spotting position beside her lane. She hadn't heard him walk over. He was already looking through the scope at her target. He said hold time on round 3 was 6.4 seconds. She said, I know. He said, you need 4.2. She looked at him. He was looking at her left hand, which was resting on top of the stock. She didn't move it. She said, I know. He said, so fix your breathing, not your hand, your breathing. There was a silence between them that lasted about 4 seconds. In those 4 seconds, several things happened that neither of them acknowledged. He had told her without saying it plainly that he had seen the tremor. She had not denied it. He had told her without offering sympathy that the solution was not what she might have assumed it was. The most intimate conversation she had had in 3 years happened in those 4 seconds. It felt nothing like intimacy. It felt like being handed a wrench by someone who expected her to know how to use it. She turned back to her rifle. She established position. She put her attention on the base of her exhale. She counted down from 5 to 4.2. She broke the shot. The plate rang. She did it 4 more times, 4 more rings. Hale wrote a number in his notebook and walked back to his lane. Owen Briggs, who had been watching from the lane on her other side without appearing to watch, turned back to his own rifle and started his next string. He didn't say anything. But later, when the team was packing up and Eva had already loaded her truck and driven out, Owen said to Hale, is she going to be okay at 1300? Hale was coiling his data cable. He said, she'll figure it out. Owen said, you don't know that. Hale said, I know she's been here every day we've been here, and she'll be here every day we're not. I know she missed 1 round in a 5-round string at 1100 meters and then ran 4 clean. I know she doesn't make the same mistake twice. He picked up his case. He said, yeah, I know. Owen looked at him. There was something different in Hale's voice, not softer exactly, more certain, the way a man sounds when he has moved from watching something to believing it. Owen said, when did you decide that? Hale picked up the spotting scope bag. He said, Thursday. He walked to his truck. Owen watched him go. The range was empty now. The flags moved in the afternoon wind. The steel plates at distance were small and silver and waiting, the way targets always wait, without judgment, without preference, for whoever is skilled enough and determined enough to come and find them. In 2 weeks and 4 days, the National Law Enforcement and Military Precision Rifle Challenge would begin at a range outside Flagstaff, Arizona. 94 competitors, 7 stages, 600 to 1300 meters. Eva was already on the road back to Albuquerque, her left hand steady on the wheel, her mind already on the variables she hadn't solved yet. She had 14 days. She intended to use all of them. The range outside Flagstaff sat in a high flat valley where the wind came from 3 directions and lied about all of them. It was the kind of range that had been chosen specifically because it was difficult. Not impossible because the competition needed people to finish, but difficult enough that the margin between a good shooter and a great one was legible. The conditions would read you whether you wanted them to or not. Eva arrived the evening before the competition began. She drove in at last light, when the sky was going orange and the temperature was already dropping toward the kind of cold that would be waiting when she woke up in the morning. She checked into the competitor tent, received her stage packet, her lane assignments, and her competitor number. She was number 47. She walked the first 3 stages on foot before the light failed completely, not to memorize them. She had already studied the stage maps until she could draw them from memory. She walked them because there is information the body gets from standing in a place that the eyes cannot get from a diagram. The angle of the wind through the cut in the ridge at stage 2. The way the ground dropped slightly at the shooting position for stage 4, which would affect her rear bag setup. The color of the light on the steel at distance, which told her something about the berm surface and how Mirage would run in the morning. She ate alone. A granola bar and a bottle of water sitting on the tailgate of her truck in the dark. She looked at her left hand in the light of her phone screen. She made a fist with it, released it, made it again. It was steady. The tremor was always better in the cold. She had noticed that the previous winter, cold reduced some of the inflammatory response around the nerve damage, or at least that was her working theory. Whatever the reason, the hand performed better when the temperature was below 50 degrees. The forecast for tomorrow morning was 43. She was grateful for small things. She got into her truck and slept for 6 hours. At 4:45 in the morning, headlights crossed her windshield. She was already awake. She sat up and looked out. A silver truck had parked 2 spaces down. The driver got out. He was carrying a spotting scope bag and a thermos, and he walked around to her window and knocked on it once. It was Hale. She lowered the window. He said, "Wind's running left at 9. Shifted overnight from the east, which means it'll back to the right by mid-morning, and you'll need to redope between stages 3 and 4. She said, "How long have you been tracking it?" He said, "Since midnight." She looked at him. He was not the kind of man who explained himself, and he didn't explain himself now. He walked around to the passenger's side and got in and poured 2 cups of coffee from his thermos. He handed her one. She took it. He said, "Stage 1 starts at 0600. You want to walk stage 2 again before light?" She said, "Yeah." They got out of the truck. Stage 1 was set at 600 meters. It was the shortest stage, and in a competition like this one, effectively a confirmation stage. It told the scorers who had come to shoot and who had come to compete. There is a difference. A person who has come to shoot will be careful and measured. A person who has come to compete will be fast. Eva had come to compete. She ran 600 meters in a way that looked effortless, which meant she had done it enough times that the effort had become invisible. Her first round hit, her second round hit. She did not rush and she did not stall. She moved through the stage at the pace she had calculated, which was the pace she had built across months of morning sessions and late evenings and days when everything felt wrong, and she did it anyway. She went clean, 5 for 5. In the staging area after stage 1, a man about 10 years younger than her, with the bearing of someone who had recently been somewhere impressive and had not yet stopped talking about it, looked at her score sheet and said, "Army." She said, "Yes." He said, "Medical." She said, "Yes." He said, "So you weren't like combat." She looked at him. Behind his eyes was a calculation she recognized. He was deciding what she was and wasn't. He was doing it with incomplete information, which people always do, and drawing a conclusion, which people always do, and she had exactly one thing she could say. She said, "No, not like combat." She walked away. Hale had been 2 meters to her left. He had heard everything. He watched her go and then looked at the man looked at him and read something in his face and turned back to his own gear. Hale went to find Eva. She was at the water station. She was filling her bottle and looking at the hills north of the range with the expression of someone who is putting something away. He stood beside her. He didn't say anything for a moment. Then he said, "Stage 2 at 0800. She said, "I'll be ready." He said, "I know." Stage 2 was 900 meters, sustained holds, 5 rounds in a timed sequence. This was where the competition began to sort itself. At 900 meters, atmospheric variables entered the problem in a meaningful way. Mirage, wind shift, density, altitude. The math was manageable. The application was harder. Eva's first round at 900 was clean. Her second and third were clean. She was in the rhythm she had built, the breathing sequence precise, the whole time landing consistently inside the window she needed. Her fourth round was the one that tested her. The wind shifted mid-hold, not dramatically. 2 miles per hour to the left, a half-second of inconsistency in the flag at the 600-meter marker. She felt it in her read of the Mirage. She had a choice: ride it out and hope the shift corrected, or break the shot early, which carried its own risk. She rode it out. She added half a second to her hold, which put her at 4.8 seconds, which was still inside her window. The round hit. She breathed out. She cycled the bolt. Round 5 was clean. Hale logged her score without expression. Behind him, 2 competitors who had been watching between their own shots looked at each other. One of them said something quietly to the other. Hale didn't look up from his notebook. The results at the end of stage 2 placed Eva 4th overall. She didn't say the board. She was already eating lunch and reading the wind charts for stage 3. Stage 3 was the stage she had thought about the most. 1100 meters, moving target, a steel silhouette on a track that ran left to right at a variable pace. The track speed was randomized, which meant you couldn't set your dope for a specific lead and commit to it. You had to read the speed in real time, calculate the lead in real time, and break the shot in the window you had, which was narrow and getting narrower at the far end of the track. At 1100 meters, everything was amplified. Wind error amplified, lead error amplified, hold time error amplified, and the tremor, if it chose this moment to assert itself, would also be amplified. Eva sat up in position and waited for Hale's wind call. He said 9 right, slight back component. Mirage is slow, take your time on the read. She nodded once, she put her eye to the scope. The target appeared at the left edge of the track and began moving. She found it, she built the lead, she settled into the hold. The shot broke at 4.1 seconds. The target rang. Second round, same sequence, Klein. Third round, the target speed increased. She miscalculated the lead by a fraction, felt it as the trigger broke, and the round hit the left edge of the plate. Scored, not center, but scored. Fourth and fifth rounds were clean. She sat up, logged it, moved to the reload position for the second string. The second string was harder. The wind had begun its mid-morning shift, the same shift Hale had predicted in the dark that morning. It was not yet settled into its new direction, which meant it was unpredictable. Unpredictable wind at 1100 meters is not a problem you solve. It is a condition you work inside of. Round 1 of string 2 hit. Round 2 hit. On round 3, the tremor arrived. It didn't arrive loudly. It never did. It was a small tightening in the lateral muscle below her left thumb, a frequency she could feel through the stock. The crosshair walked 1/10 of a mil to the right. She knew it. She felt it before she saw it. She reset. She did not fire. She released the trigger, took 2 full breaths, at the bottom of which she told the muscle to let go and reestablish the hold. It cost her 3 seconds. The shot broke at 4.3 seconds. The round hit the center of the plate. She fired rounds 4 and 5 without stopping. Both hit. When she stood up, her hands were steady, both of them. Hale had watched round 3 without saying a word. He wrote in his notebook. He did not offer her a comment on the reset, which would have been condescending, and he did not offer her silence that meant something, which would have been worse. He simply recorded the shot time and the hit and moved on to the next entry, the way a professional records data. That night, the scores were posted on a board outside the range office. Eva Shi aggregate through 3 stages, 5th overall. She was the highest-placed woman in the history of the competition to reach stage 4. She looked at the board for about 4 seconds. Then she went back to her truck and ate another granola bar and read the weather forecast for morning. The forecast said 41 degrees, partly cloudy, wind from the northwest at 8. She closed her phone. She slept 1,300 meters. She had shot that distance clean exactly twice in her life, both times in controlled conditions. No variable wind, no moving target, no competitors on the line beside her, no noise, no one watching, just the rifle and the math and the long empty distance between the barrel and the plate. The competition's final stage was different. The final stage was 11 shooters on the line simultaneously, the scores of the 9 preceding you mattering to your standing in ways you couldn't fully calculate without knowing who had dropped shots and where. The wind conditions were what they were and no forecast could change them. The steel was cold and small at the end of the distance, and it did not care about anything you had done to prepare. Eva had placed 4th going into the final stage. 2 men above her had posted perfect scores through stage 6. One had dropped a shot on the moving target. First overall was a man named Craig Wyatt, former Marine Scout sniper, who had been shooting competitively for 11 years and who moved through each stage with the economy of a person for whom the competition had already been decided in training. He was good. He was very good. Eva had no interest in Craig Wyatt. She had interest in the plate. Hale set up beside her at 0645. The light was still coming in flat off the horizon. He assembled his spotting scope, checked the mirage rising off the berm at distance, and read the flags. He said, wind is northwest at 8, but the cut in the ridge at 900 is running cross. It'll add a half-mil push right in the final quarter of the bullet's flight. You'll need to hold left of your dope by 1/4 mil to compensate. She said, how sure are you? He said, 70%. She said, what's the call if you're wrong? He said, if I'm wrong, the round goes left of center. Still inside the ring at 1300, you'll score, just not clean. She thought for a moment. She said, "Call it." He said, "Hold left 1/4 mil." She nodded. The stage officer called the line ready. Eva got behind the rifle. There is a specific quality to the moment before a long-range shot that people who have never taken one cannot fully imagine. The distance is not abstract. You can see the plate through the scope, and it is small in a way that tells you something true about the world, that the margin between a hit and a miss is smaller than most people spend their lives worrying about. And yet, in that margin, everything you are has been poured. The weeks on the range, the mornings on a mat in a cold garage, the hand that would not cooperate and had to be negotiated with, the long drive out, the night in the truck, the coffee in the dark with a man who never said more than the situation required, all of it distilled into a 4-inch steel plate at the end of 1,300 meters of open air. She breathed. She settled. She felt the hold come together the way it came together on the good days, when every variable aligned into something that felt less like physics and more like inevitability. 4.1 seconds. The shot broke. Hale had the spotting scope up. He was still for a moment. Then he said, "Center." She cycled the bolt. Round 2, round 3, round 4. She ran them with the same cadence, the same breathing, the same hold. Each one rang the plate. Each one landed where she had decided it would land. Round 5, the final round of the final stage. The wind shifted. She felt it in the flag and saw it in the mirage. The northwest component dropped and the crosswind from the ridge cut increased, which meant Hale's 1/4 mil hold was now a 1/3 mil hold, and she had about 2 seconds to make that adjustment before the window closed. She made the adjustment. She broke the shot. The plate rang. She sat up. She looked out at the berm with her naked eye. 1,300 meters away, a piece of steel she couldn't distinguish without the scope sat in the morning light, scored on every round she'd sent it. She did not celebrate, she did not pump her fist, she did not turn to Hale and say anything. She put the scope cap back on the rifle and picked up her brass and put it in the bag she kept for that purpose. Hale wrote the score in his notebook. He closed it. He began to break down his spotting scope. He said, 1/3 mil adjustment on round 5. She said, "I felt the shift." He said, "I called it late." She said, "Not that late." He said nothing for a moment. Then he said, "No, not that late." The scores were posted at noon. Eva Shi, final aggregate, 3rd overall. In the 12-year history of the National Law Enforcement and Military Precision Rifle Challenge, no woman had ever placed in the top 5 overall. The previous best was 9th in the 3rd year the competition ran. 3rd was not first, 3rd was not perfect, but 3rd at 1,300 meters in a field of 94 competitors with a hand that required negotiation every time she pressed it to a stock was a particular kind of result. The kind that doesn't announce itself loudly, the kind that simply sits there in the record, clean and unambiguous, waiting for whoever needs to look at it. Craig Wyatt found her in the staging area after the scores posted. He said, "Good shooting," and meant it. She said, "Thank you." That was the entirety of the exchange. The young man from stage 1 was nowhere to be seen. In the parking lot at 2 in the afternoon, Eva was loading her rifle case into the truck. Hale was 3 spaces down, doing the same. When he had his case loaded, he walked over and stood behind her tailgate while she latched the lid. He said, "You should have let round 3 sit another half-second on stage 6. She said, "I know." I felt the wind start to drop and I pushed. He said, "You'll fix it." She said, "I know." He picked up his spotting scope bag. He said, "Same range, Thursday, wind's going to run different." She looked at him. He was already walking back to his truck. She turned back to her tailgate. She closed it. The parking lot was emptying. Competitors loading gear, talking over the day's shooting, some of them already replaying the stages aloud. The ordinary machinery of people finishing something difficult and beginning to process what it meant. Eva got into her truck. She sat for a moment without starting it. Her left hand was on the wheel. She looked at it. It was steady. It had been steady all day, through every stage, in conditions that should have made it worse. It had been the kind of day that happens rarely, when the body and the training and the conditions all arrive at the same place at the same time, and the result is something you couldn't have planned, only prepared for. She knew the hand would not always be like this. She knew there would be worse days and bad stages, and mornings when the tremor showed up early and stayed late and the shots didn't land where the math said they should. She knew all of that. She also knew she would be at the range on Thursday. She started the truck and pulled out of the lot. In the rearview mirror, the range shrank behind her. The steel plates at distance were already invisible in the afternoon light. Somewhere on a board outside the range office, a number sat beside a name, quiet and permanent, waiting for whoever needed it to still be true. It would be third overall. One woman, one rifle, 1,300 meters. Not one round more than the stage required.